Excellent. Not going there. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2002 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law 30A, subsection 18, and pursuant to the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing a limitation on the number of people that may gather in one location, the meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information such as instructions and guidance for remote by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town website at www.yarmouth.ma.us. For the public portion of this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch and listen and participate in the meeting may do so by connecting via the YouTube address published on the agenda for the evening. For those who wish to make public comment, they may do so by using the following email, publiccomment@yarmouth.ma.us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Today we have two presentations. We have the Cape Tech presentation, Bob Sanborn, and the town administration, Bob Lawton will be presenting that. We're going to open the meeting with a roll call, and then we're going to go over minutes that we have, and then we'll go on with the presentation. So George.
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Stephanie.
Aye.
Nate.
Aye.
Jack.
Here.
And I am present as well. We have minutes to go over. I believe the date of those minutes was October
28th, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, October 28th. Did everybody get a chance to review those? Do we have any questions or comments? I know it was quite a while ago, so trying to remember exactly what transpired is no easy task, but if anybody has any comments.
Brian, when you sent these out, I missed it. So I haven't looked at any of these, so I'm not going to be comfortable voting on it.
Same.
Same.
When were they sent out?
I believe
I them sometime last week, I believe.
Okay. Were they flagged separately or were they included in a different email?
Note they were in the email with the presentation. So
Okay.
with the agenda, with the presentation. When was that? That was Friday, February 5th.
Okay.
We can,
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to vote on these because I haven't reviewed them. So I can either abstain and you can move forward with the people who did, or it's up to you, Mr. Chair.
So we have, we'll wait until next meeting to approve these. That's fine. I'd rather everyone get a chance to read them. They're a little bit dated. We're going to get back on track with meeting minutes, so that will be good. Pat, I believe we do have someone who's going to take the minutes going forward.
we do have someone that is transcribing minutes from our videos, and they have started and did this one, and now they were called to some family support down in Florida. So once they get there, they're going to establish and assess how quickly they can do the others, but they are on track. And I was pleased with the design and also the content of these minutes. I think we'll find these very useful.
I agree with you. They were fine. All right, so we'll review those next meeting that we have, whether or not it's going to be next week or the following week.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman Cox had a question.
Yeah, Stephanie.
Yeah, just want to confirm, because I'm just looking through my emails real quick. It's just the minutes for October 28th. So only one set of minutes that we're reviewing, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
No, I just want to make sure that I have it in my to-do list to read one and not 3 or something. So that's it. Thank you.
Just 1 week.
Just one.
So why don't we go forward with our first presentation. Bob Sanborn with Cape Cod Tech is here to present this evening. Welcome, Bob. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me for those who heard this just last evening. And thank you for having me here today. The opening slide here is a current picture of the new facility that the taxpayers of all 12 towns, but in this case, I want to thank the taxpayers of Yarmouth who helped to support this project back in 2017, and it's slowly but surely coming to an end. I would see it probably closing out by definitely a year from now or even less. So go ahead. The work that we're going to be presenting, or that I'm presenting, is from our finance committee along with our business administrator, Aaron Orcutt. These individuals are from our school committee, of which Norm Michaud represents the town of Yarmouth. And we started this work in the school in the April timeframe of last year, but then got to work with the finance committee in October. And we will have our public hearing in February. We did present the budget to the entire school committee in January. Before I go into enrollment, I do want to thank Chris Greeley and Norm Michaud, who serve on our school committee for the town of Yarmouth. And I also want to thank Eric Tolley and Nathan Ladley, who Nate is here this evening, who both serve on our building committee, both indispensable members of that building committee. So where are we at Cape Cod Tech after, well, you'll see in a slide or two from now, we are on an upswing in enrollment. And in this particular year, Yarmouth, along with a drop in the Barnstable enrollment, there's been quite a shift in the percentage of Yarmouth's percentage of our total enrollment. So we're up 10 students as a district, which is about the third or fourth year now that we are increasing our enrollment, which we're very, very happy about. But there's a 22 student increase from the town of Yarmouth. We can go, thanks. Oops, yeah. So like just a few years ago, Barnstable was probably 33% of the entire population, and Yarmouth, I think, even went below 20% at one point. But they are both about neck and neck now, comprising over 50% of the entire population of our school, with the town of Dennis being the next most populous as far as student enrollment at Cape Cod Tech. And you see the breakdown for the rest of the towns. So this is the history I was alluding to. We had hit a low of 570 students in FY20, and you'd see that was a steady decline for several years prior even to FY18. And you see that in Yarmouth, it was a decline as well. So in 18, we had 137 students down to a low of 110 in FY20. And I used the line last night is that I was usually saying about the assessment, it's going down, you're welcome. But tonight I have to say, I'm sorry, the last 2 years have been a steady increase in the amount of students from Yarmouth at Cape Cod Tech. Not apologizing for that, but it's the size of the assessment for this year that I'm apologizing, because we're very excited that more and more students from the town of Yarmouth are availing themselves of a technical education at Cape Cod Tech. So the budget I'm presenting this evening is a 1.99% budget increase over our initial budget from FY21. You see to the right there, we've had several years of proposing or passing budgets that were either below 2 or below 1%. And then in FY21, we did ask for 2.76%, and the towns were supportive of that. But then in the interim, with COVID and the financial strains that everybody was feeling, we went back and reconfigured our revenue budget and also made some cuts to our existing budget in FY21 to get down to 1.34. But as far as assessments were from FY20 to 21, we were level. And that's what we wanted to accomplish with FY21 being such a unique year, although I know 22 and 23 are probably going to be very unique as well. So a 1.99% budget is a 1.99% on that original budget of 2.76. That's a $15,812,000, and that's a $308,000 increase over that original budget. So as you can see, the vast majority that supports this budget comes from our towns in the form of assessments, which is nothing new. State aid doesn't make it down here in any great amounts. And if we go to the next slide, we could. Yeah, so this just shows in a graphical form as the operating budget has gone up. As I said, 1 or 2% a year, in some cases less than 1. Really, state aid has not kept up, and assessments have to shoulder the burden of most of those increases. With our local revenue in the last couple of years, we have increased the amount of money we've devoted to the budget. When we redid our budget for FY21, I think we are over $900,000 of local revenue we put towards supporting FY21, and in this budget we have over 400. I think it's 465,000 of local revenue. The vast majority of that is coming from our excess and deficiency funds. This is just a history of budgets, state aid, and assessments, and our contributions for local revenue. And you can see what I was just talking about. We've really ramped up our local revenue in the last couple of years, and we hope to sustain. You see from the history, we don't normally devote that amount of money locally, and especially from excess and deficiency. But in these unique times and trying times, we felt we wanted to defray assessments as much as we could. And we're going to do that this year to the tune of 465,000. And I do feel as though we can sustain that for a couple more years into the future here as we potentially hit tough economic times. We are a people business, is education, and the number one percentage is teacher salaries. The second most important people in our building after the students are our teachers on the front line with our students, both technical and academic teachers. And so over 35% of that budget is devoted to teachers. But the next most, the biggest is benefits. And if you take all the salaries in this budget and the benefits in this budget, you're looking about 76% of the budget devoted to those two categories. This is really just that graph with the numbers. Just a couple things of note I want to talk about. I'll talk a little bit about insurance benefits and OPEB later, because I think we've made some significant strides in trying to deal with the unfunded liability of retiree benefits. You see that I can recall just several years ago that retiree benefits line, that 834,000, that used to be about a 200,000 or 300,000 line item, and it continues to grow. We actually have more retirees from Cape Cod Tech now than we do active employees. So you can turn that one.
Sorry, Bob.
That's okay. So what does this mean to this year? You see the assessments for all 12 towns. This is based on the governor's budget and the required contributions that came out just a couple weeks ago. And that's a $3.1 million assessment for the operating budget for the town of Yarmouth, which I have to say is an increase of over $440,000, which is about a 19% increase. And that's the reason for my apologies at the beginning of my statements. As I said, we're very happy students are coming to us from the town of Yarmouth, but I do understand that this is a big swing in 1 year, and it really has to do with enrollment, driven by enrollment. I mentioned E&D, so we have contributed a certain amount. The question might be, what do we have left? And we do have 3.1%. You remember of the next year's budget, which is about 475,000. That's not certified yet, but that's a very good estimate of what we currently have residing in E&D. We do see that by the end of this fiscal year that we'll be able to increase that to a certain amount. How much that is remains to be seen, which I think that's why I say I think it will be able to sustain some decent contributions from E&D in the next couple fiscal years at least. And then I would see a return to that normal number you saw in the history of local revenue a few pages ago. So that's our E&D picture. I wanted to talk a little bit about our relationship with the OPEB, Plymouth County OPEB Trust. As you see, in 2015, we joined this trust. They manage our funds and several other entities, public entities. And we currently have almost 2 million or 1.8 million at this time in that OPEB trust fund. And we are devoting 200,000 within this budget to fund the OPEB unfunded liability for primarily health insurance. We have a plan, a 28-year plan to retire that unfunded liability. So it started a couple years ago at 100, or a year ago at 150,000, because we had a pre-existing balance in our OPEB reserve. And we will increase that $50,000 a year up to 300,000, and then that'll level off. And the Barnstable County retirement system also has an unfunded liability they're trying to retire. So you see an assessment in our budget for the Barnstable County system. If Barnstable County is able to retire their unfunded liability when they forecast it, which is around 2040, we would then take the 300,000 we're devoting, add what we were used to devote to Barnstable County in this 28-year plan, which would be a significant increase, because I think Barnstable County now is a high fours, low fives number in this budget, 100,000s. So we would, in the later parts of the 28-year plan, to be devoting a good amount of money to the OPEB liability, which, if coupled with the returns that the OPEB trust has been giving us, obviously being conservative because the market has been relatively, although up and down, it's been overall up significantly in this trust fund, that we could retire that unfunded liability in 28 years. That will surpass my retirement date, though. So our capital debt, you know that in 2017, we were able to garner almost 76% of the vote in the 12 towns to build the new Cape Cod Regional Technical High School. And I really have to thank the taxpayers of Yarmouth, as well as the other 11 towns, for doing so. And can't wait to show more people from the town of Yarmouth. A few have seen it. I know Nate's been out to see it, and it's still being finished, but I want more townspeople to be able to see the community resource that the new Cape Cod Tech, just like the old, but with we're very pleased that we're open for business this year. We have 75% of our students in at any one time right now, and of which we're very proud. All our technical programming is in person, and academics is a combination of in-person and online learning. So as you see, the capital debt, we secured a bond in FY20 for 3.32%. That's a fixed rate over 20 years and in a declining debt schedule, level principal. The overall assessment for capital debt will decrease as the years go by. That is apportioned on a yearly basis by enrollment percentage. So whatever the total number is on that right-hand column, and for 22, it's that 6255 number, gets apportioned by enrollment percentage, which is a double whammy for the town of Yarmouth in this particular fiscal year. So if you turn to that, I think we have the assessments for capital assessments for the new building, and there it is at 1.5 million, almost 1.6. And I think that may be the end of this. This is just combining the two. So the operating assessment coupled with the capital assessment for 4.7 in total, of which the 3.1 is the operating budget. I think that's the end. So I would, it's the end of my formal remarks. I think everybody got a line item budget as well. So I'd open it up to questions.
Anybody have any questions for Bob? I'm sure there are some. Well, I do have a few, Bob. I actually have 3 questions, and they're more just explanations if you could help us out.
Sure.
Some of the terminology, that the excess and deficiency, if you could kind of just give us,
Sure.
for those that really don't quite understand what that means. One of them, and perhaps there are others that don't as well. Secondly, is there a reason why did we move to the Plymouth retirement plan from the Barnstable County at one point?
I'll explain that. We did not do that.
Okay.
I'll explain that.
And then thirdly, I'm just going to throw them all out there, and we can, that bond that we took out for the 60+ million.
Yep.
Is that a callable bond at some point? I know 2019 interest rates were significantly higher than they are now. Would that be a 5-year call? that we could reissue in 2025 if rates were where they are now?
On that question, I'd have to get back to you.
Okay, it's just, I mean, I know
Good
it's
question.
significantly, 2019 happened to be a fairly significant spike in interest rates for a
Yeah.
very short period of time. And now we're back down significantly lower, so that would
Yeah,
be,
I can certainly get an answer to that, but I don't have it for you
Okay.
this evening.
okay,
On the other two, let's start with E&D. It stands for excess and deficiency, and for a regional school district. So this year we would be able to hold up to 5% in our excess and deficiency. Almost, it'd be like a free cash for a town or a rainy day fund for the state. That's what regional schools are allowed to do, like DY as well. So it'd be 5% of, in this case, this budget would be allowable. The slide I showed we had about 3.1%, and that was that $475,000 number. The two ways money goes into E&D at the end of a fiscal year are any surpluses on the revenue side of the budget. So there's the revenue side of the budget. So if we exceed the $15,812,000 in FY22, or if you look back at the total for 21, if we exceed that number, any overage in revenue would go into E&D it would be closed out to E&D at the end of the year. And then also on the expense side, any monies that are left over after, any surpluses on the expense side,
Bob, you got a
unless they're apportioned by the school committee to another account, say it be OPEB, or say it be our severance reserve account, things like that. If it's not, that surplus is also put to E&D, and that happens on an annual basis. So it's kind of like a free cash or a rainy day fund in the state case. They call it excess and deficiency. So to clarify what I meant to say on the Plymouth OPEB trust, we're a member of the Mass Teachers Retirement for our teachers, and then everybody else is in the Barnstable County retirement system. We joined the Plymouth County OPEB trust to house the funds for our OPEB trust to hope to address the unfunded liability. And so everybody knows what OPEB is. It stands for other post-employment benefits. So it's the costs in today dollars of everybody on the books and what they're going to cost in retirement for their benefits. So we're looking to build a reserve that over time will be able to address that and not eat into operating budgets like it does for many of us right now. Because as I said, in our operating budget, there was an $800,000 line item for retiree benefits. That's because we're paying as we go. That every retiree, whether they have dental or health benefits, that's what that number represents. And if you can retire the unfunded portion of that, you can lower that number and as I said, in a 28-year period. But we are in the Barnstable County retirement system. It's just the Plymouth County that started this OPEB trust for housing funds like these. I hope that was clear.
it was, thank you.
Okay.
All right, what else, Stephanie?
I have several questions. I almost don't know where to begin. Okay, so first, just a couple of quick questions to just elucidate those of us who are somewhat new to this. So you talked about, the rise in kids from Yarmouth enrolling and decrease in Barnstable. I'm just curious if you have any explanation behind those trends that might be happening.
Yeah, with regard to Barnstable, it was a large senior class that went out the door, and it was followed by a smaller freshman class that came in the door. So that's the swing in Barnstable. In Yarmouth, it's a big freshman class that came in, and it's kind of the reverse. A small class going out the door from the town of Yarmouth, and a much bigger class coming in. Every year, we're an application school. We have an admissions policy, and there's a certain amount of students we can take, which is around 175 students every year. And it's based on a scoring system that's approved by the state of Massachusetts. So which students get in and what town they're from is every year is a, it's a moving target. But in this particular year, it was a bigger than typical, freshman class from Yarmouth and the vice versa in Barnstable, and a smaller class going out the door for Yarmouth.
So Bob, I guess what I'm getting at is just, are there any bigger trends that we need to be aware of? I mean, obviously we know that there's a renewed interest in kids getting technical education as opposed to four-year college degrees kind of nationally happening. We know that it's becoming more expensive to live on, the lower Cape and even starting to become here. And it's kind of pushing families closer to the bridge, right? Are there any other kind of trends like that we need to be aware of?
I think you identified a couple of them. We did, as you saw in the enrollment, we were on a downward trend. The building definitely is having an impact on admissions. And we also redoubled our efforts with admissions. We took a guidance counselor and devoted their workload is admissions now, and they are the point of contact with everything to do with admissions for Cape Cod Tech. And the building and that swing or that shift in personnel, I think, have had a pretty good impact. The amount of applications are up significantly. It is kind of bucking the trend, Stephanie. I mean, overall, the demographics don't look great,
Right.
and they actually don't. They look worse in the next 5 to 10 years. Right now we had that steep decline, and it kind of leveled off. It's been still going down, but going down very slowly. But we've been able to make up with it for some of the reasons we just talked about. But there's another drop coming. For all the talk of a COVID boom of people coming down here, I don't think that really has materialized, and certainly not young people. So I think there's going to be another drop in the next 5 to 10 years, and we're built for 650. We really didn't increase the size of our building and building our new facility for that reason. It was the demographics longer term, for many of the reasons you mentioned as well, wouldn't have supported building a bigger school.
Yeah, I think we are seeing more younger people, but I think that they might be going to private schools because they're wealthier.
Well, especially during COVID,
Yeah.
because those private schools are in person. Many of them some of them may come back. There's a big drop this year, not at our school, but in many of the comprehensives for that reason.
So one of the other questions that I had was around transportation costs.
Yes.
So just looking over the figures that I saw in the spreadsheet for this current fiscal year that we're in and what's proposed for next year. I mean, are you having kids there 7 days? Not 7 days a week, 5 days a week. I would think that transportation costs under COVID would be less.
No, they're more. So we have a figure in there in the $800,000 range, if I'm not mistaken, and that's running 11 buses, 180, 100. We now, to get 75% of the kids in school, and we started that, I believe, in November.
Mhm.
We have 2 bus runs going now, one for technical programming, one for academic programming. And it's because of the protocols for the amount of students that can go on a bus at any one time. So we
Right.
actually have about 19 buses running now daily back and forth, which we are able to absorb in our FY21 budget by cutting in other areas. And then we also had some help from some of those COVID funds that came during the fiscal year. But no, transportation actually is more to the tune of over $200,000 more this year. I don't envision that next year, and these numbers don't anticipate that. We have a 5-year contract, and I want to say we're in the 2nd or 3rd year of a fixed contract. Yeah, it looks like we're in the 3rd year of a fixed contract with Cape Destinations.
Okay, so 2 follow-up questions to that. One is, what did the governor's budget propose in terms of regional school transportation funding, like percentage? And I know
They-
when I work for Cleon, it went up and down from anywhere from like 90% to 50%.
Ever since Cleon retired, it just kept going down and down and down. No, it's been wavering in the, as you know, it was supposed to be 100% and never was. It's probably in the high, in about 70% right now, but in the governor's budget, they it's dollar figures. It's not percentages because there's always somebody else.
Run the math yourself. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other question is,
I would say just, we are forecasting 505,000
in reimbursement.
in reimbursement. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Which if they reimburse on the cost of double bus runs, we should get more than that, but we don't know they're going to do that.
Yeah. So the other question I had was, would you be eligible for any federal funds, CARES Act or whatever?
We are due. The ESSER 2 grant has just come out. That was right at the end of the Trump administration. That's going to be about $434,000. We're actually going to a webinar on that on the 22nd of this month to learn all the ins and outs of that.
So are those figures then from the state and the feds that all built into this budget?
The 400 is not built into this budget. And no, in either case, because the others are FY21 related.
Oh, right. Okay. But wouldn't that somehow then impact the E&D amount then?
That's when I said that I thought we could sustain E&D for a couple of years here at those higher figures that I showed.
Okay.
The reason I think that is because, yes, I think there's going to be a significant surplus in the FY21 budget.
Yeah.
And that will go into E&D, which would then allow us in FY23 to hopefully sustain the numbers, a number similar to the one you see this year.
Okay. And then the only other question that I have is, I just saw that you had like something like advertising and like public relations in there. I was just curious what that is.
That's exactly what it is. We have 12 towns and 5 schools that we need to get the word out on who we are. We are the vocational technical high school for those 12 towns and those 5 school districts. But we're not right down the street. So we use direct mail. We have in the past used radio. We're not using it this year. But direct mail, we use social media advertising as well to reach 7th and 8th grade families of 7th and 8th graders to make them aware of what we're offering. Many years ago, when I first started at Cape Cod Tech, there used to be every kid from every district would come and see what we're about. The competitive nature of education on Cape Cod, we do get students who are interested, who the sending district, a kid comes to the sending district and says, I'm interested in seeing Cape Cod Tech. But we don't control that. We don't have any influence over that. So making sure everybody is aware who we are, way up there on the former exit 10, now exit 82. There's a degree of advertising and public relations that's needed.
I can see the advertising. I'm just curious what the public relations is.
Public relations is primarily it's getting the word out, press releases and things of that nature. And in the past, we've employed somebody part-time to help us with that. In FY21, that person left our employ and we've not replaced that position, but we do anticipate starting that position again in FY22.
Have you explored just, hiring a company to do that?
We actually, when I say we employed, they weren't an employee. We paid them as they were a vendor. The people they invoice us in that manner. So it wasn't an employee. They weren't paying benefits or anything.
Yeah, it seems, I can see the advertising. Direct mail costs a lot of money. Social media, not as much, but the public relations piece, that seems a bit high. I guess the other thing I'll just say is that I agree with Brian that I would really love to see, the school the school district explore refinancing the capital loan.
I will get an answer to that.
Yeah.
On the callable bond.
It'd be a missed opportunity if we didn't.
Yep.
And I think the taxpayers, all the towns would really, really appreciate that as all these other costs are going up significantly. That's all for me. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
George?
Yeah, Brian, I have three questions, and now I think I actually have a fourth, given Stephanie's last question. Let me start with that one. I'm assuming you don't have a financial professional that would be on top of this. Who actually issues the bond for you? I realize you hire somebody to do that on a investment banking side, but who on your side would they be talking to?
They would be talking to me and our business administrator, Aaron Orcutt. But we contract with Hilltop Securities, who is a financial advisor on the project and the bonding for the project. I will get an answer to that. I want to say I inquired about this issue because I do recall the interest rates diving there since we entered that bond, and I don't think they are callable, but I didn't want to answer it until I get that confirmed.
Okay. My first question is
At the time, everybody loved that interest rate, by the way.
historically, it's probably a very good rate still. But the first question is sort of jargony
Yep.
and reflecting my own ignorance, but what is local revenues?
Well, local revenue is, when we rent the facility.
All right, so that's
Interest income and,
okay.
but
or
the vast majority of that is the excess and deficiency I spoke of earlier.
Okay. Second one is your other revenues, there's state aid, there's local assessments, but I didn't see any federal government lines. So is that because for vocational education, the feds are not big players, or why?
No, we have some positions that are funded by IDEA, special needs funding. We have some that are not many positions funded by the Perkins Act, which is for vocational technical education. Both those grants are about $2 and $100,000 from the federal government that filters through the state. And then we also have Title I funds that are about $140,000.
So where in the revenue presentation did that come out?
That is not it. We've not traditionally done that. What we do is we reduce the line items in the budget that are funded by those sources.
Okay. So just an accounting arbitrary distinction. Okay. The other thing, and again, this reflects my ignorance, I noticed that teacher salaries are less than 40% of the overall budget. Just from my own experience, at least from academic schooling, it's about 70%. So just explain to me, I guess it's a reflection of your operation, but I guess I'd like to understand why.
I don't think 70%. I think salaries and benefits are, in our case, 76%. But teachers' salaries alone.
Well, all right. So salaries and I'm looking at the full compensation.
Yeah, salaries as a whole, most certainly.
We're good. All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else with questions? Okay, Bob, I think we are all set. Great presentation. We really appreciate it. So I think we're good. Have a good evening.
Same to you.
Thanks for coming in.
Now, nobody knows that I wore the same shirt and tie both presentations either. That's good. Thank you.
Listen, I've decided I'm never putting a suit and tie on again, so we're good.
I'm in favor of that.
Bob, I have pictures of both. Just be prepared. Okay.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for controlling the PowerPoint. I appreciate it.
No
Take
problem.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. You're welcome.
Have a good night.
I'm sorry, Nate, were you saying something? Nope.
I said to Bob, have a good night.
Okay, great. We are moving on to Bob Lawton with administration. He is here to present. Bob, the floor is yours.
Give me a sec, guys. I've got to get up his PowerPoint.
He's on mute. Is Bob, you're on mute.
Yeah.
There you go.
Not there.
I've had a problem. I had to switch computers because I couldn't, it's still it was unstable. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm not getting your PowerPoint up yet, Bob, so don't apologize. I'm having a hard time with it.
Oh,
I don't want to leave the meeting. Thank you
Well,
very much.
I could
I think you can
start.
talk through it, Bob.
The easy part of it is that the budget has not changed significantly from this fiscal year. The one thing I don't know at the moment, the selectmen are still negotiating with the incoming town administrator, Mr. Rittenhour. So I don't have a final figure. It will be close to what Mr. Knapik's was in the budget, but it will most likely be more than this. We're not asking for any additional personnel. We have the 6 people that you see in the budget, 4 in the administrative staff and 2 in the HR division. Our expenses have been stable except for increases in utility line, the energy expense line. So it's not too much heavy lifting in preparing it. Ed Centio certainly helped in putting the numbers together, but that's kind of where we are on our budget for this coming for FY22.
I do see that Ed's on the line. Or on this call. I didn't know if he wanted to chime in at all. Ed, do you have anything to add further?
No, I think Mr. Lawton covered everything.
I love that. That sounds great.
Absolutely.
So we can open it up for questions. That was a very nice thing.
Thank you, Ed.
That was nice.
Sometimes I'm unsure.
Stephanie?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I can't find a copy of the spreadsheet for administration, but you mentioned not adding any new salaries. What about an assistant town administrator?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Bob?
That is budgeted. There is no one at the moment.
Yeah.
And pardon me?
Go ahead.
Oh, so there's no one at the moment. One of the first jobs when the new town administrator comes in, I get to move my body over to the assistant's office and then help Bob Rittenhour hire a new assistant.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure that that was budgeted because I feel like that position has gone unfilled for far too long. And, you know, I think that for this committee to be able to kind of.
They've had, I think you're right, Stephanie. They've had turnover there.
Yeah. And I think for this committee also to be able to really, you know.
I know that just to follow up on that, what I'm noticing, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say for this committee to be able to maximize its usefulness, we need to have, the staffing, to be able to really kind of dig into the details.
Yes.
Here's the PowerPoint if up on that particular
Well,
line.
And nothing, Pat's been
okay.
amazing kind of stepping in here, and that's
But
really.
I think Stephanie,
You don't think I should be the
Right.
new assistant town administrator, Stephanie?
but you're
Only you
absolutely
give up
right.
your day job, Pat.
Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
I can't, you're breaking up, Pat. I can't hear you. You're breaking up, Pat. I can't hear you. What did you just say? No, never mind. But I think Stephanie, that's an excellent point. You do need stability in the office, not only the town administrator, but the assistant, because that person does play a major role as a department head, as well as some staffing for the finance committee.
Yeah, and I think as far as that role goes, I was, I did share with a couple of selectmen, I was a little disappointed that there were no qualified either female candidates or candidates of color. And I certainly hope for the assistant position, that we will see some,
Yep.
efforts to outreach, beyond kind of what we've had,
Yep.
and kind of reflect.
I do feel pretty good about that when I just left Harwich as their interim assistant about a month or so ago. And one of my jobs was to do some recruiting there. We had 70 applications for that job. And Joe Powers, the administrator, was narrowing that down to 15. We did that. I don't know within that group, I know there were male and female. We didn't ask, nor were we told if there were any minority folks in there, but he was going to be interviewing. So I feel good that Yarmouth is at least as desirable as Harwich, and I would expect that we would get a large number of applicants.
Anybody?
So
else?
is there anything, I guess the other thing is in here, I mean, so look, we're looking at a $750,000 increase. We know generally the numbers coming out of DY are going to be rough, right? And we know that we're going to have to make some hard decisions as far as the whole town budget. And I think we should have been asking this of all the department heads as they came through, but where, if you were to make a recommendation of where there might be a little bit that we could trim, what would it be?
In this budget?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, many of these are fixed, unfortunately. It would have to be a reduction in staff. I think is the only place where there would be any type of wiggle room, for lack of a better word. There's just not that type. I'm hopeful that as we won't have to do like an across the board decrease, which is one option. I always prefer to have the department heads pick and choose, just like I think you're saying. Here's what we have to get to, you need to pick. We don't have in our budget the easy overtime to wipe out, stuff like that. I suppose you would have in expenses the professional and technical. That might be someplace where you could tighten your belt for at least 1 year, but they've been doing that for so many years. We are filling some vacant positions, not in this department, but in other departments, because many are falling behind. But you're right, that would be a decision by each department.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Anyone else have questions for Bob? I think we are all set. That was
Okay, and as the selectmen finalize the contract with the new administrator, I will get that figure to you through a revised budget document.
okay. Great.
So I have questions for Bob, but on different topics, on sort of next steps.
Sure.
I'll wait for the chairman for when he wants to move on to that.
Yeah, so I think we're done with that presentation, Bob. I think we're good. So let's
Okay.
get those questions out there, Steph.
Yeah, so Bob, as you may, as Pat may have informed you, some of us on this committee are a little bit newer, and also, obviously going through COVID, as a time of needing, additional kind of, support and guidance. And so I think the thing is understanding the logistics of the time frame. I know that you had said that the charter requires us putting together our recommendations by the 28th. And there was some talk of potentially delaying our presentation from the DY school committee because they're getting revised numbers in, and Pat taking time off. I guess the first question is, how much time does it normally take for the finance committee to be able to deliberate and kind of go through recommendations and come up with a consensus? And then, so the second question is, how do we kind of back into that with such a tight schedule?
The only issue in the charter is the meeting on the 23rd of February, where you do the recommendations. Now that can be, as I think we talked about before, especially like on the school, you would say, we're waiting for some more figures, but we're using as part of our overall package the numbers that we have right now. The second things we need to do will be later in the middle or latter part of March. Those are the formal hearings that are required under the charter to have a public hearing for the budget of the general budget and then the capital budget. So to answer your question, you have about a month in order to fine tune these. We need to make sure that you have the most up-to-date numbers. I'm not sure how many more budgets you have to review, at least through this mechanism.
Just
And then it will
DUI.
really be just you. Oh, okay, okay. See, back in the old days, when I was here, we had to meet twice a week with the finance committee. I would meet with the finance committee. I think we did Monday and Wednesdays, and Tuesdays was the selectmen meeting. And but it was a lot of work. I think that's been scaled down and really streamlined. You folks have done a great job on doing that. But it is, I think one thing you'll need to get is when Ed Centio is ready, and that will be fairly soon, he will provide you with the overall budget picture. And that'll either be good news that we think we can balance, and really from where available funds will come to fund capital and also some of the operating budget. I think Ed, and if I can ask him, Mr. Chairman, if Ed could come on, I think that is an accurate schedule, but I'd like him to answer on his own if he could.
Yes, we'll have, as soon as we have the DUI number in, or have some idea of what the DUI
Right.
number will be, we'll be able to understand what we might need to do to our budget to get it in balance. And Bob and I have emailed about a couple of options to try to get it into balance, and
Yeah.
some are draconian and others are maybe short-term COVID related moves that we might make. But we've been through this. Bob's been through this for 30 years. The budgets don't get easier. We have to make some very creative and tough decisions as we go through the budgets. Over the last few years with the economy booming, not as much,
Right.
over the last 5 or 6 years, not as much, but, this was a 2008 to 2010 exercise as well. So it's, we need to see if we're going to cut expenses, or are we going to, do other things, and what will we ask of the school to do? What will we ask the departments to do? So there are many ways to do it. So we have to come up with a strategy that everybody accepts.
So again, I just want to make sure I understand the time frame, because Bob, you referenced the 23rd a couple of times as a point where we need to present something to the Board of Selectmen. Is that right?
Yes,
Yes.
So,
yes. That's what the charter requires. It's recommendations.
right. So then, but if we don't know what the DUI budget figure is going to be, then we would just do it.
Right.
It just seems like it's gonna be just a completely fake number.
Right. Can I interject here? So I'm curious to know, Bob, so we're supposed to be voting in the next 13 days. I need to present to the Board of Selectmen on the 23rd our recommendations to all the presentations that we've seen over the last 6 or 8 weeks. All those numbers could end up being
Right.
flawed. So doesn't it seem that
They could change.
they will change? I don't even think it's a could. I think they have to change.
Well, yeah, I see. Yeah, right. You're right.
So we're going to go through this whole exercise, waste a bunch of our time volunteer wise, and then have to do it over again. That what I'm kind of. Do we vote once and then vote again?
I think you could be targeted in what you do once you have the final numbers. You don't necessarily have to go through every budget again. I think you've gone through the budgets. I think what we would do is represent the articles that we have, the different funds and sources of funding that we have.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the options, so right now we're in deficit by $440,000 based on getting the school number in. You saw a high number for the health insurance. That's going to come down because the health insurance group is going to have a premium holiday of 1 month. So that's an 8.33% decrease in the health insurance amount, even though they're putting in place a 2 to 3% increase. So maybe net, it's going to be a reduction in around 5% of the health insurance cost. So we're working those numbers, but on top of that, we have to add in the settlement for the police department of their latest contracts. Once that's signed off and that's done, so that's going to push it up again. So I'm thinking we're going to be around, $400,000 at this point without knowing DY's situation. One of the things we could do, and I presented to the Board of Selectmen, is we're taking short-term rental money off the table in terms of balancing the budget. That's pretty much our stance. However, I think we're going to have a good, or might have a good free cash number. So even though we might use that to balance the budget, if we don't want to cut staff, we can still use the resulting free cash to fully fund the wastewater with the amount of money that will result from the free cash number. That's the E&D that Bob Sanborn was talking about, our version of the E&D. So we can still make the wastewater work. We can still balance the budget. And I think it's okay to do that this year because this is a COVID year. If we knew that this was going to happen for the next 3 to 5 years, then you would be cutting expenses and you'd be cutting staff. We had to cut 20% of the staff in 2010. Finance, for example, didn't increase from that level. Other people have restored to that level. But those are the types of things, if this were going to be a sustained situation for multiple years. But this isn't like a typical recession where there are long-term fundamentals that need to be back in a line for that recession to go away. That could take 2 to 3 years. This could bounce back almost immediately because you see GDP is looking, or corporate earnings are okay. Interest rates are low. There's a lot of quantitative easing. There's a lot of actually monetary easing that's going into the market. So, the economy could bounce back rapidly depending on what happens in the third quarter. And what I would suggest for a lot of the capital and the free cash is like we did last year, and that came out of our bond review in March, was to say, where we don't have capital that we absolutely have to spend right away, let's take a 3-month pause or a 4-month pause between the April town meeting and November, where we'll have a fall town meeting, figure out where we are from an economy standpoint, and then spend the money on the capital and some of the other things that people have on their wish list, as opposed to saying, well, we think it's going to be great, but we don't know. Why not be cautious and, fund the regular budget, try to use maybe the short-term rental money to try to balance the budget, and then have a few more months under our belt and figure things out in November and see where we can go in terms of potentially restoring spending. That's an option, but there are the options of cutting expenses. And as Bob indicated, or may have mentioned, we've been pretty much flatlining our expenses for a decade in some cases. So there aren't a lot of expenses to cut. It ends up being people. And, it's hard to get people back once you get rid of them, and it's hard to get ramped up again once you get rid of those people. That was a difficult situation in the past. It might be nice to keep those people on board to the extent possible, and then, make some adjustments as you know more about the economy and where COVID is going. Sorry for the long explanation.
Expect nothing less, Ed.
And Mr. Chairman,
I think-
if I can add in, working in with the Capital Budget Committee. So sorry. So sorry. The capital budget, with Ed's influence and explanation, has looked at what they thought were their priorities. They had a first run of their priorities where each individual member voted on and prioritized certain issues. And then when they knew that we might need to reduce our capital request by $250,000 or more, They then went and kind of talked through and eliminated some things they felt weren't important or could be delayed until the fall meeting. And so you'll see from them, and once you speak to Sandy, that they've made those choices and are leaving it up to you and to the Board of Selectmen on where you want to go with that for annual town meeting. But they've been pretty clear of things that they felt were safety issues and public safety issues, and then other things that maybe could be delayed for a few months.
So Pat, can
I think,
logistically, we're gonna have to meet more than once a week over the next 13 days.
Mhm.
So it's clear that we're not gonna be meeting with the schools on
right,
next Wednesday, so that's fine.
Right.
right.
We can do a meeting and we're gonna have to do some votes on some of the budgets we've seen, and we're gonna have to meet more than just this Wednesday or the following Wednesday. Because we won't get it done in time. Any thoughts? And Bob, maybe you can, this is where
Yep.
Dan would have really been able to kind of give us guidance because wasn't here last year, but how many meetings do we need in order to get the voting done? I'm not overly familiar with the process. I am certainly need some guidance and help with just the logistics of how we do these things.
You may want to think about on the 23rd is giving the board, you say, well, our recommendations are to have no override. We've reviewed all of the budgets and we're holding, this may be what you say, holding the line on expenses. We're not allowing, or we're not going to recommend increases. And we will have the final votes to you at the public hearing, which will be sometime in the middle of March.
So we can
Because
do
it is
that.
a difficult, pardon me?
We can do that.
I believe you can, because the charter, and I don't have it in front of you, but I believe the charter says that you would present your recommendations. It doesn't necessarily mean, and I would take, what do the lawyers say, in my opinion?
Ah.
That you would say that we have reviewed all the budgets. Our recommendations are these, not specifically. We looked at, example, we looked at the police budget. They're not having any increase in staffing, but we believe that they should have their overtime raised by $50,000. I mean, just picking a number. On the fire department, we're going to level fund. On the town administrators, we're slashing and burning that because they have no idea what they're doing. Those types of,
Isn't that so true? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let me make my notes.
Those types of things, I think you can be general enough that you do not have to bring in specifics. Okay, we took a vote on this date and this is the amount we did, because it is a work in progress. I think the hearings, because we have to publish sometime early in April, we have to publish all of the recommendations. That's really at the public hearing in the middle or latter part of March is when your votes would really have to be done as much as you can. Now, there can be a case, I know like on DY, I know the Board of Selectmen in the past have said, well, we're going to recommend from the floor. That's a possibility. That is a recommendation because we're hopeful, but let's say the school is thinking, well, we're going to get some more money. The federal government is going to come through, or there may be some like a COVID money, whatever the heck it is, that may lower our assessment. You don't know what that is. So I would suggest you would not publish a recommendation, I'm picking on DY, a specific recommendation on DY because you don't know. So you'd say, we're going to recommend from the floor, and that's perfectly legitimate.
And hold that recommendation until the night of town meeting when you meet earlier and make your final
Well,
decision.
hopefully you don't have to wait that long. And I think the school needs to be pushed to make every effort to have the assessment something we reasonably can do, because I do not believe the Board of Selectmen wish to have an override on any of the budgets.
Right.
I think they want to try to maintain within 2.5. And it may be that we have to pull out some of the rental money. Putting it back though, because the Board of Selectmen as a policy have said they want to have the rental money, the additional rental money go for wastewater, because that's such a big expense. We need to bank that. And then I don't know the status of the county, because the county gets, not Barnstable County, but there's a group within the county that gets a significant amount of money from the tax that is back apportioned to towns based upon some criteria, which I am not familiar with. So kind of a
2.7.
long answer, but I think on the 23rd, I think we could do the presentation, as I said, broad enough. But yes, we've looked at them all, things of that nature. I don't
So
want to write.
in theory, what is essentially, you just kind of said and didn't say, but we could recommend that we make our recommendations once the final numbers on the school come through, so that we're actually giving like realistic recommendations instead of recommendations that, because I think that's what the committee's
yeah.
expressing right now, is that
Yeah,
it's
right.
like almost a waste of time for us to be recommending something that's not real.
Because they will change. I think, Sarah, you're absolutely right. But I think you would say, we've had a first cut through every budget, except maybe for DY, depending on when they're coming in. We've made our recommendations to the departments, I'm assuming you did this, to come back to us with these adjustments, et cetera, et cetera. And as you said, Sarah, we will be ready at the public hearing and maybe before to give you all of the final recommendations. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. We meet the criteria, we check the block off for the charter, so we're not in trouble with that. But you're also taking a prudent step that you don't want to make recommendations just for the sake of doing it.
So I think though, and we haven't at this point asked everyone, what they could cut. And I think in order to do that in a kind of an equitable way, we would need to know, okay, if we're estimating like 400,000, then divide that by however many, departments we have, and then, X percentage is what, we'd ask you to
Would
try
be
to
the goal.
away.
Sure.
I would assume that's the most equitable way to do that, but if you have other suggestions of how to do that,
No, I think, well, that would give a target, and I think you would be asking, it's up to you, department head, to tell the finance committee, you want to take it out of expenses, do you want to take it out of wages? And if you take it out of expenses, we don't want you to have zero and then ask the town or the town administrator at the time to transfer money in. Be realistic. Don't just cut for the sake of making the numbers come out. Do something that's realistic and that is defendable.
Because I think the other thing that's just kind of a big picture umbrella thing that's I feel like we need to talk about that we haven't really in several months at this point is what is in the stabilization account, how much we're pulling from free cash. We have the recommendation at this point, but I don't know. I personally am still feeling a little fiscally conservative here, that we might need to maybe be putting a little bit more aside. I don't feel 100% confident that like in September we're, herd immunity, economy is going to come roaring back.
Right.
I think a lot of our small businesses that account for our local receipts are, potentially going to dry up and die over the summer, unfortunately. So I think that's one kind of big picture umbrella kind of thing that we need to decide as a committee that will also kind of inform some of the principles. But I wonder, Bob, in addition to that, are there other sets of questions of kind of big picture things that we should be thinking about kind of going in that we can use to frame our preliminary recommendations to the Board of Selectmen? As you mentioned before, like no override, no, try to avoid salary cuts, that type of thing.
Ed has a better handle on the actual numbers, but I think you could say, well, you see a number from Ed, you say, well, we don't want to spend more than 2/3 of that. We want to keep that reserve. I think Ed's idea on the rental is probably what would happen. We'll take some, but then put it back when we have some better figures. Yeah, you could do that. There aren't any real, I know what you're saying, the stabilization fund would be used for capital. I don't believe you can use that for operating, nor should you. it's really a capital thing. But
And,
as someone, I think it may have been Ed, said that it's a rainy day fund and it's really raining out.
I would say though, that the stabilization should be a very last resort.
Mm.
We have a lot of funds that the departments have.
Right.
That should be looked at. When I was in the last interim town administrator situation, I would give the list of the articles, particularly those that are over 3 years old, that should be retired as per our charter. I would also give all the funds that each one of the departments have that they could tap into. If you tap into the stabilization fund, then that's a red flag to the S&P that you should have your rating downgraded.
Yeah.
And that would cost us more in interest. We do have a capital stabilization fund outside of the regular stabilization fund.
Right.
I would say that you could utilize that as needed. But if our fund balance, our overall fund balance goes down, again, that's a red flag to the stabilization, I'm sorry, to S&P. So I think we have a lot of funds and a lot of money in a lot of different pots that we can look at first before tapping into the stabilization fund.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm conflating different terms. My point is that I feel like we should be conservative in terms of making sure that there is, you know, a some kind of rainy day
Yes.
fund. We're not depleting those funds
Yep.
in one shot, because I feel like COVID's going to go on for a long time.
Mm.
That was my point. But I wonder, Ed, if that kind of principle that you just discussed of here are the pots that we have, or here are the pots that each department has that they could, you know, and here are the things that are 3 years, you know, out of date. Could you put that into some kind of spreadsheet or presentation, or could you ask
I can
department?
send you that in about 15
Already
minutes.
done.
Yeah, it's already there and we've been looking at it and we're trying to like
Right. Mm.
redirect it. I mean, Ed's been great about putting it out there, so.
We
There.
have, I think we're uncharacteristic of most municipalities. We have an incredibly robust management information system capability. And we provide that information to every department on a weekly basis, so they know what dollars they have to spend. And what we tell them is spend your grant money, spend your funds as it is legal before you start spending any of the general fund money, so that we can preserve free cash. And we've been building up our free cash contributions or generation over the last several years, because we've done that. You know, when police and fire in the past would say we need extra money, we say, well, look at the money you already have, spend that before you ask for appropriations from other people. So that's been the process we've done over several years to make sure that, in a lot of these pots of money, people didn't know they had them. They were there, they were hidden in the financial management system. And that was one of the things that, you know, I was lamenting looking back at 2008, 2010. Not all of the pots of money were known. And that's why I would be loath to actually reduce staffing, because I think we have other ways to make this happen. They're not gimmicks, but they're actually prudent, I think, ways to manage the town's finances. And
I think we're talking like a 1.4, $1.5 million list that hasn't been encumbered. There's encumbreds, and then at the end, there's a
Wow.
significant amount of money.
But some of it is restricted, so you have to be careful.
Right.
Because sometimes you have, and in the best of all worlds, after 3 years, you go to town meeting and rescind them. That's the way I'm used to doing it.
yeah, what
We do have the
Bob-
list. I'm going to start to look at it. And then Ed will be happy to, I think, as he said, to share it with you folks.
Yeah, and
So it
Bob,
sounds
we got a
like-
ruling. We got a ruling from town council that said that Bob. So obviously, you know, Bob has been here or was the town administrator for 30 years. Bob was
2
ahead
weeks, 3 weeks. That's
Yeah.
all he's been here.
Bob was ahead of his time, because the state is just now catching up to what Bob and the town did. I don't know how long ago, Bob, that you could actually transfer money
Oh.
before the end of the fiscal year, as long as you didn't exceed your appropriation.
Right.
The
It was
town is
the,
now,
when we did the first charter, we put that in there and had long discussions with DOR about it. The theory was, if the school department can do it, why can't I do it? As long as we have the finance committee, the board of selectmen, and the town administrator signing off on it in a public meeting. So there
during,
were checks and balances. I just can't move money around because I feel like it. I need to get your approval and the selectmen's.
so during COVID, the rest of the state said, wow, maybe we should do this. And I'm going, well, Bob Lawton thought of that, 20 years ago, however long that was.
Mm.
But our town council said that we can also do that for our articles as well. And at town meeting, what we can do is we can say that certain funds or certain articles, as long as they're articles you can do anything with, you can say, I want to close out this article and use that money
No.
to actually fund something else. So we can do that with the vote of town meeting. And then if there's another funding source and that funding source is used for, as Bob indicated, what it was set up for, I'm not talking about the articles, the general fund articles, I'm talking about the other funding sources, then you can actually tap into that money, both for operating or capital or whatever that fund might be. So we have an incredible flexibility in terms of the amount of money we already have available to the town. Again, that's before utilizing any of the stabilization funds.
You're just starting a kind of a new perspective of looking at that and utilizing that when it was not done for many years. So you're breaking new ground to look at that.
Yeah,
And
I will say though, I've gotten the sense with some of the budget transfers that it's, with what some of the things that they're being used for is a little bit of a matter of departments wanting to hold on to their level funding rather than actual need. Especially
Oh,
in,
okay.
really tough fiscal times like that, I'm not super wild about that approach from department heads. I would really, rather see that be something that we can, put towards, that rainy day. And so just logistically then, getting back to what Brian was asking about in terms of the process and how we would kind of go about this. I mean, it sounds like you all are kind of already doing what we're talking about. You're probably already having these conversations with the department heads about, what would you want, what would you recommend cutting if you had to cut, right? So would you present that to us? What's the logistics of how we go about this?
On the reductions, if there need to be some, it would, they would, I guess, depending how long I'm here before Bob comes, we would be saying, here's your target number. You need to tell me how you want to adjust your budget. And that would have to go back to the finance committee to review and then take a formal vote, say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't. We think you should do this because you've looked at the budgets as much as anyone.
Do we have to have them re-present that information, or is it just something that could, if a budget was going to be cut from, let's say $100,000 negative, do we really need them to come and present that to us, or could we just, it's not an increase. It's one thing if it was an increase, but in a reduction of a budget, if we voted and said yes to XYZ, and then they say it's XYZ minus 100. Well, if we approved XYZ, I can't imagine we would have any argument approving it with a reduction of X amount. So would we need to, I'm just concerned about timing for everybody.
Yeah, but we're also talking, Mr. Chairman, about potentially not having that vote the first time because we don't know what we're going to have to deal with.
Not for the 23rd. No, you're right. I think Brian's looking at the longer term. On a big budget, you might want to have someone come back, but on adjustments, it would really be a presentation by us saying, here are you had agreed that we should reduce by 5%, pick a number. And here's what we did.
Right.
You take a look at that and say, yes, you agree, or no, you don't agree. You take one vote and that would adjust the budgets. You would not have to meet with every single department head.
That's my concern.
No, that's,
these go very long.
I don't think we've ever done that.
A lot of precious time for a lot of
right. Oh yeah.
committee. I just
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
can't go through
This
that.
is hard work, no matter what anybody says. I mean, it's a lot of time and it's a lot of study. It's not just an hour or two on a Tuesday night. It's all of the preparation work that I know you do in reading the budgets, trying to think about, well, think about your questions, think about what the effect might be of a reduction or even an increase.
So let's talk about next meeting. And Pat, maybe you can kind of give us some of your wisdom. We're not going to have DY in, but you've got lots of wisdom to give. So DY doesn't come in. So next week we have a meeting. It's gonna have to be, I don't know if it's gonna be any kind of voting. Is it gonna be a discussion about what the presentation to the Board of Selectmen is gonna be on the 23rd? Is
Yeah,
that
and
comfortable?
some options for you, Brian. So you look at, DY has presented an initial that was looking at a certain percentage, and we talked about that. Now, Bob has talked to Ken and thinking that it might be reduced from that based on the meeting on Monday, which they're holding. But I think, you look at preparation for how you want to approach the reduction of the budgets. And Bob, I think you and Ed are better at this than I am, but it's a time for a discussion. Maybe it's a workshop meeting instead of, and set up in a way that you can kind of have these discussions of, do we want to look at a 5 or a 10% reduction opportunity, and how would we approach that? Or, when the schools finally get their final number, or when DY does, because I think you've gotten text tonight, then how do you want to approach that? Do you want to have public safety make the same cuts as you want human services to make, or that sort of thing? So I think that's part of the discussion. Bob, what do you think?
Well, I don't know next week that you're going to be ready to say we want to cut 10%.
No,
You
I'm
don't
just
really
saying,
know.
I'm sorry,
I
those
think-
are arbitrary numbers, Bob. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
But I think, well, but of even any amount, I think next week you would want to be discussing, here's how we're going to make our quote recommendations, unquote. And I think it, not quite this simple, but as I'm repeating myself, you might say, we've reviewed almost all the budgets. We have a couple more to do, the big ones.
10.
And overall, this is what we've done. And our recommendation is going to be based upon the major expenditures that are unknown at the moment, being DY. I think, Ed, we may have, well, the Board of Selectmen have not voted on the police patrol package. They did have an initial meeting a Tuesday. They're going to meet again this coming Tuesday to try to wrap their heads around the cost of this thing. So you won't know those. But that's what I would be, I think, saying on the 23rd for the selectmen's meeting. And then you'd have another month to do the final votes. We'd have the numbers, I would think, to you. Even if you're saying all these budgets are good, but DY we're going to recommend from the floor because they are just not done. And that's the only position I think you can take, because you don't have the solid numbers.
And that's been done a number of times, right, Bob?
Yeah, almost every year there's the last minute stuff. It's not a good way to run it, but the school is a separate entity and they can do as they choose. They do have to, I think they have to give a number sometime in March by law, and that number can go down, it cannot go up. So you will know that number, and we would probably build a budget based upon that number that they have certified. Then over the course of the next 30 days after that, they could lower that if they choose to. We always are optimistic that they will.
Would you have any interest in coming to our meeting next Wednesday?
I think I can.
And
Will-
and then the follow-up to that is, what pieces of information do we need to have in front of us as we kind of explore that? Like, is there something that we can have from Ed that kind of gives us, the big picture with
yeah.
and placeholder stuff, that type of thing?
What do you think, Ed?
What I'll do is I'll give you the articles and the funds. You'll have that tonight. what we're working on, hopefully over the weekend, would be refining the healthcare
All right.
numbers. We'll refine the police numbers based on what the proposal is. And that would be absent what you'll see from DUI. And so that will present either the options of, utilizing short-term rental money to cover that deficit and or cutting budgets to cover the deficit, or doing something else. And, really our budget doesn't start until we hear the DUI number. I think you guys have vetted the numbers to make sure people just aren't off the reservation in terms of what their requests are. The budgets were requested at level funded with only collective bargaining increases. And you, I know, listening to you, have vetted each one of these budgets very, very closely. It's a matter of, people have asked for more money. Is this the year to give people more money? I don't know. But you have a lot of numbers. What we're missing the key piece, which could, result in a lot. And when we usually voted from the floor, it was how much of an override might there be? And if we've said that, for the schools, if we've said that there is no override, and we have to pass that school number because we're obligated to pass that school number, then if you vote from the floor not to accept it, but the town meeting accepts it, then you might have to actually cut other budgets to allow that school budget to actually pass. So this is unlike other years where, we might have said, hey, if the school is over Proposition 2.5, then anything over Proposition 2.5 is going to go to an override, and then you vote at the ballot for that school override. I don't know that we have that option this year. It might be that you would have to, at the floor, cut the budget. So we really need to know before we get to town meeting exactly how much of a situation we have to deal with. And as we go through the articles that come before the school article, that might be where we're actually having to reduce those general fund types of articles in order to meet or have an overall budget, unless we say that, hey, our go-in position might be that we're going to use short-term rental money for 4 months to balance the budget. So, maybe a little different than other years, but the budget really doesn't, what you're doing, you're vetting budgets so they just aren't out of line. And then we're waiting for the school number. And we've tried to get them to do their work sooner. And they have a lot of issues that they say impact their budget, but we have those same issues because we have more revenue streams, a greater number of revenue streams, and a greater number of dollars that are subject to market variations, where most of their money is fixed and it comes from the town. So we still want to work with them. We've tried to give them help so that they could start their budget process in August. But this just is a very difficult situation when we don't get their numbers until March. And that's just, kind of where we are. And, Bob's wrestled with this longer than I have, but I think he was able to work, maybe with the schools at a certain period of time where that wasn't such an issue, but it has been an issue in the last decade or so.
And I'll just add that, considering my newness to this, as well as yours, Mr. Chair, and others, that, Bob and Ed have been through this a long time, and they really are your advice. They are the focus for you to be able to go through this. So I'm happy not to share anymore, but just to make the Zoom happen.
Don't put me in the class of Bob. I'm not there.
Oh, we could make that fight for a while, but we're very pleased to have both of you. You are excellent, and you've done well for many years, taking care of us.
So what do we as a committee need to do to prepare for this next meeting? Do we need to schedule, a secondary meeting between now and the 23rd, or do we think that the one will be sufficient? And, what should we expect in terms of kind of, staff kind of leading this through this process? I just want to make sure that we're prepared and we're using time wisely.
Mm. I think if you agree that it's going to be on the 23rd, a very general discussion of recommendations in the broadest definition of that word, I think you may be able to do it in one meeting because you're not going to take any votes, at least as I understand it. And I think that's acceptable. That you're making your recommendation that here's where we're going, but you have these several unknowns that you can't finalize the budget, but in general, here's what we've done. I mean, I don't know, have you made reductions or recommendations of reductions in any of the budgets? Or are they're coming in the way you asked them to? In general?
In general, yes.
Okay. I think the selectmen the other night when they did police and fire, they said, what, I think the police department wanted $25,000 additional for, I think it was training, although I don't really recall. The fire department, they're looking to try to get a safer grant, so-called, to add 4 firefighters. Interesting, the safer grant now pays 100% of the cost for 3 years. In the past, it was on a sliding scale. It's something like 75, 50, and then 25, and then you pick up the total load. The selectmen asked them to do an analysis of how you're going to pay for this in the 4th year. I mean, that's really the critical thing. First 3 years are easy, but that 4th year, you're going to pay for 4 full-time firefighters with all of the benefits, et cetera. That's a big number, at least I think. So anyways, back to the question. I think you can be that general. Since you're not going to take, I don't believe, take any formal votes, you could have the one meeting and just fine tune. Here's how, unfortunately, the chairman will be presenting the so-called recommendations.
Wouldn't be unique though, would it, Bob? Because it's happened years and years on because
Right.
of DY's
Right.
position.
We're meeting what the charter requires, and we're getting ready for the formal hearing, which will be the middle or latter part of March, when you will have to have votes, because the finance committee needs to finalize the vote so we can publish the warrant.
It seems to me that there wouldn't be any issues with going that route, simply because of the fact that we can't really vote on something that we don't really know the final details. I can't imagine we're running afoul of anything.
Oh, no, I agree.
This is
No, you're not.
exactly the way we need to go forward.
Yeah.
It gives us more time. I mean, we're running in a really unique environment here, trying to figure out
Yes.
exactly how to get things done. So I don't want to rush things. If we can do it this way, I'm
Yep.
much more comfortable going in this path. And then it gives us an entire month.
Right,
If we need to meet, multiple times a week, then we'll do it. I mean,
if you need to, sure.
if we need to. I mean, I know Sarah loves that, so I've got nothing to do, so I can do it every night if I need to.
Jeez.
I'm
Well, the
kidding.
good news is you can blame me.
Right. We are already.
Well, no, Bob told us we could do it this way for the meeting. And that's suggesting that. But I think that makes a lot of sense for your part. Yep.
Yeah. So that's good. So,
Okay.
I think we've gone through what we need to do tonight. I think we need to look at, there is a budget transfer on the agenda, but I don't believe we have any, Pat. Yeah. Okay. We've discussed new business, which is what we're doing right now. I think the meeting has run its course.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So if anybody would like to add anything further before we look for a vote.
Are you, next week is at 6 also?
Yes.
Would you like to adjust that, Bob, or make another recommendation? 5:30?
Sure, we'll meet in the middle of the day and then I don't have to do anything at night. Ha ha ha.
Got
No.
workers here, yeah. Mhm.
But and I think you could probably, if you're not having any presentations,
None.
so you probably get through this in an hour or so, especially the way you framed it.
I just want to clarify a couple quick things, Bob.
Hmm.
So we need to present to the Board of Selectmen on the 23rd. I have in my notes that that's also the day of the Capital Budget Committee hearing that evening. Is that,
It's the same presentation.
okay, it's the same
So as
presentation.
a priest, and the only other thing on the agenda, if my memory is correct, the CPC, the Community Preservation, are coming in to present, here's what we have, the CPC so far. I've tried not to put too much on that agenda.
Okay, and then my other
It's
question is just a logistical. Is this a Zoom meeting?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And I would add that, community, capital budget is actually a subcommittee of finance, so it would be a part of your presentation. Sandy and Brian would work that out so that it is
Oh.
kind of combined, right, Brian? Right, Bob?
Apparently so.
Sure.
Mhm.
Usually you let them do their thing and then you would do yours.
Yeah, as I recall, the last one that I sat through, it seems like it was forever ago in real life, person v. person. They went first and then we
Yep.
went second. They did a presentation on their own, and then Ken did a presentation. I don't remember any kind of connectedness between the presentations.
No. You want the capital budget committee to go first, wear the selectmen down, and then you can do yours, short and sweet.
Right.
And then we're all done.
We're shooting for
done
5
by 8
minutes.
o'clock.
That's the goal.
Sure. We can all dream. And we can all dream.
I agree.
Okay. That sounds good.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. Second, please.
A second.
Let's get a roll call. Stephanie, please.
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
George,
Right.
Nate,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
I'm an I as well. All right.
See you all. We'll see you
Thanks,
soon.
Bob, for coming in. We appreciate it for all your
Sounds good.
guidance.
Nice to see you, Stephanie.
Thanks,
Again.
Ed.
Good night, you all. Be
Good night.
well. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Yep.